There's a specific feeling that hits somewhere around your early to mid-30s that nobody really warned you about. It's not panic. It's not desperation. It's not the kind of financial anxiety that wakes you up at 3 in the morning in a cold sweat. It's quieter than that, and honestly, more unsettling because of it. It's more like a slow, creeping confusion that you can't quite put your finger on. You're earning more money than you ever have in your life. You've got a real job, maybe a promotion or two under your belt, possibly a house, probably a nicer car than you drove in your 20s, maybe a partner, maybe kids, maybe both. On paper, your life looks like progress. It looks like the trajectory everyone told you to aim for. But then you check your investment account. Or more likely, you avoid checking it because some part of you already knows what you'll find. And something doesn't add up. The number sitting there doesn't match the story you've been telling yourself about how far you've come. You've been working hard, earning more, spending carefully, or at least that's what you tell yourself. And yet the wealth you imagined having by now feels strangely, stubbornly out of reach. Like you're walking up a down escalator, moving, but not arriving, working, but not building. Here's what will probably bother you more than a little. That feeling isn't a coincidence. It's not bad luck. It's not the economy, though the economy certainly doesn't help. It's the result of a very specific set of financial traps that are uniquely concentrated in your 30s. Traps that are not only invisible, but are actively disguised as good decisions, as progress, as the natural, reasonable rewards of a life well lived and hard earned. And the most dangerous part isn't the traps themselves. It's that almost everyone around you is falling into the exact same ones at the exact same time, which makes the whole thing feel completely normal and socially validated right up until the moment it doesn't. My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why smart, hardworking people consistently make the same predictable mistakes at the same predictable life stages. If you're someone who wants to understand what's actually happening to your wealth in your 30s, instead of just hoping the numbers magically sort themselves out by the time you're 50, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it helps you see something you hadn't quite been able to see before. Now, before we get into the specific dangers, let me ask you something. When you picture the biggest threat to your financial future, what comes to mind? Maybe you think about a sudden job loss, maybe a medical emergency that drains your savings, maybe a market crash that wipes out your investments right before retirement. These are the threats people spend the most mental energy on because they're dramatic. They show up in headlines. They feel like events. They have a before and after. But here's the thing that nobody is talking about. The force that's actually quietly destroying wealth for millions of people in their 30s isn't dramatic at all. It doesn't show up in your bank statement as one big, terrible number. It shows up as 1,000 small numbers spread across 1,000 reasonable-sounding decisions, each one completely defensible on its own. And that's exactly what makes your 30s the most financially dangerous decade of your life. Not because disaster strikes, because nothing dramatic happens at all. Let's start with the first trap, and honestly, the most insidious one, because it doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like finally living your life. That trap is lifestyle inflation. And in your 30s, it doesn't arrive like a stranger. It arrives like a promotion, like a raise, like a wedding, a first home, a baby, a second baby, a title change, a bonus. It arrives disguised as every milestone that society has carefully trained you to believe should come with an upgrade. But think about what actually happens the moment your income goes up in your 30s. You get a raise. Maybe a significant one. And the voice in your head, the one that has been waiting patiently since your broke 20s when you were eating $2 frozen burritos and splitting utility bills with 4 roommates, finally gets loud. You have earned this. You have been sacrificing. You have been driving the beat-up car and eating at cheap restaurants and making things work on a tight budget. Now it is time to actually enjoy the fruits of your labor. And so you upgrade. Not recklessly. You're not a fool about it. You're not buying a boat. You're just making reasonable adjustments. A nicer apartment, because you work hard and you deserve a good space to come home to. A newer car, because yours is getting unreliable and dependability matters now that you have real responsibilities. Better restaurants, because you're a professional adult and eating well is a quality of life issue. A gym membership, some nicer clothes that actually fit your career level, a few streaming services because entertainment is self-care apparently, weekend trips because you need to decompress from the job that's funding all of this. Each of these decisions, in total isolation, is completely defensible. There isn't a single item on that list that a reasonable person couldn't justify. And that is precisely the trap. Because what you've just done is ratchet your baseline cost of living up to match, or in many cases, quietly exceed your new income. The raise didn't make you richer, it made your life more expensive. And here's the brutal math behind what that actually costs you long term. Let's say you get a $1,000 per month raise at 32. After taxes, you're taking home maybe $700 in additional pay. If you lifestyle inflate to absorb that entire raise, which most people do without ever making a conscious decision to do so, you have lost $700 per month in potential wealth building. That's $8,400 per year. Invested at 8% annual returns starting at 32, that's $700 per month becomes roughly $640,000 by the time you're 62. You didn't spend $8,400. You spent $640,000. You just didn't know it because the transaction happened in slow motion across 3 decades and never showed up as a single line item anywhere. And the thing that makes lifestyle inflation so perfectly calibrated to destroy wealth in your 30s specifically is that your income grows the fastest in this decade. The raises are real. The promotions happen. The salary jumps when you change jobs are significant. Every single one of those income increases is a genuine opportunity to build serious, compounding wealth, and every single one of them arrives with a perfectly timed invitation to spend more instead. Most people accept that invitation every single time, not out of stupidity, out of completely understandable human psychology. You feel like you've earned the upgrade, and you probably have. The problem is that you're paying for it with your future. The second danger in your 30s is one that feels like the opposite of a financial mistake. It feels like graduating into adulthood. It feels like the smartest financial move you've made in your entire life. I'm talking about buying a house, or more precisely, buying more house than you can actually afford, because your 30s are when the social pressure to own property reaches its absolute peak. And the bank is suddenly willing to hand you an amount of money that sounds impressive, but will cost you far more than you realize. Everyone around you is buying. Your coworkers are comparing neighborhoods and talking about square footage. Your friends are posting renovation photos on Instagram. Your parents are asking with increasing impatience when you're going to stop throwing money away on rent and start building equity like a responsible adult. And the mortgage broker is sitting across from you telling you that you're approved for $550,000, which in some part of your brain translates to $550,000 being a reasonable amount to spend. It isn't. The number the bank approves you for and the number that will allow you to actually build wealth simultaneously are two completely different numbers. But in your 30s, the social gravity pulling you toward the larger number is stronger than at any other point in your life. Here's what being house poor in your 30s actually does to your wealth over time. It doesn't just stretch your monthly budget uncomfortably, it freezes your investment contributions at the exact moment in your life when they would be the most powerful. The math on compound interest is brutally specific about timing. Money invested in your early 30s has 30 or more years to grow. Money you don't invest because your mortgage payment, property taxes, homeowner's insurance, and inevitable maintenance have consumed every available dollar simply disappears from your financial future. Not temporarily, permanently. You cannot go back in time and reinvest the money you didn't invest at 33 because you were house poor and stretched. Let me show you what this looks like with real numbers. Take two people, both 32 years old, both earning $95,000 per year. Person A buys a $480,000 house, stretches their budget to make it work, ends up with total monthly housing costs around $3,800 per year. Person B buys a $310,000 house, keeps total monthly housing costs around $2,400, and consistently invests $800 per month. By age 62, assuming 8% average annual returns, Person A has approximately $268,000 in investments. Person B has approximately $1,072,000. Same income, same age, same 30 years. The single decision about how much house to buy created an $800,000 gap in retirement. That's not a minor lifestyle difference. That is the difference between having options in retirement and having none. The third danger is one that most people in their 30s not only fail to think about, but actively avoid thinking about because it requires facing a piece of math that feels genuinely threatening. That danger is the compound interest window closing. And this is where the 30s shift from merely expensive to potentially catastrophic for your long-term financial picture. You've heard that compound interest is the most powerful force in wealth building. You've nodded at that statement. You may have even repeated it to someone else. But here are the actual numbers, because the numbers are the only thing that makes this real and stops it from being just another piece of advice you agree with and then ignore. If you invest $500 per month, starting at 25, and earn an average annual return of 8%, by age 65, you'll have approximately $1,745,000. Now, push that start date back 10 years. Same $500 per month, same 8% return. Start at 35 instead of 25, and you end up with approximately $745,000. You invested the exact same amount every single month. You took the exact same level of risk. The only variable that changed is that you started a decade later. And that one decade cost you exactly $1 million.
Let me say that differently, because I want it to actually land. 1 decade of delay in your 30s costs you $1 million. Not because you made a terrible investment, not because the market crashed, because time ran out. Because compound interest needs time the way a fire needs oxygen. And your 30s are the last decade where you still have enough runway for the math to do the real heavy lifting for you. Every year you spend in your 30s not investing seriously is a year you cannot recover. And unlike almost every other financial mistake, this one cannot be corrected with a smarter decision later. You can pay off debt later. You can downsize a house later. You can increase your income later. You cannot go back and unlose 30 years of compounding. This is the mistake that feels the smallest in the moment and carries the largest price tag over a lifetime. The fourth danger operates so quietly and so completely within the norms of social life that most people never identify it as a financial threat at all. That danger is social pressure spending, and it peaks in your 30s for very specific and largely unavoidable reasons. Your 30s are the decade when your social circle gets expensive. Friends are getting married, and the weddings are no longer cheap, casual affairs. They are destination events in places that require flights, hotel blocks, and a gift off a registry where anything under $150 feels like you're signaling that you don't really care. You're expected to attend bachelor and bachelorette parties that run $500 before you even reach the airport. Friends are having babies, and the gender reveals and baby showers and first birthday parties have somehow evolved into catered events with custom signage. Your coworkers are going out to the kind of restaurants where the bill arrives and you do a quick mental calculation while pretending to be interested in the dessert menu. The group chat is planning a trip every 6 months to somewhere that costs real money, and declining feels like it means something about your friendship or your social standing. And here's what makes this particular danger so effective at quietly eroding wealth. Every single spending decision on that list carries real social cost if you say no. You're not just skipping a party, you're sending a signal about where you fit in the social hierarchy. You're risking a friendship. You're opting out of the shared experiences that define this particular decade of your life. Nobody wants to be the person who couldn't swing the bachelorette trip, and so people go.
They spend. They put it on a card if they absolutely have to, and they tell themselves they'll make up for it on savings next month. The problem is, next month has its own social obligations, and the month after that. Research consistently shows that social spending is one of the least examined categories in most household budgets, precisely because it doesn't feel like discretionary spending. It feels like being a good friend. It feels like participating in your own life. But the cumulative annual cost of social pressure spending in your 30s can easily reach $8,000 to $15,000 per year for someone with an active social life in any reasonably sized city. Invested consistently over a decade, that is several $100,000 that quietly never arrives in your retirement account. Here's something worth sitting with for a moment. The person in your friend group who seems unbothered by expenses, who appears to have some kind of financial clarity that everyone else is still searching for, is almost certainly not earning dramatically more money than you are. They've just quietly stopped funding their image with their future. They said no to some things. They let some social obligations quietly expire. They made peace with occasionally being less impressive to people who will genuinely not remember the details in 6 months. That is not deprivation. That is what the foundation of actual wealth looks like from the outside. Now, let's talk about something that runs through all 4 of these dangers like a single thread, because identifying it is the most practically useful thing I can offer you in this video. That thread is identity. Specifically, the gap between the identity of someone who looks like they're winning financially and the identity of someone who actually is. Your 30s are the decade when the performance of wealth and the actual accumulation of wealth diverge most dramatically. Because your 30s are the first time you have enough income to fund the performance convincingly. The car that signals success, the house in the neighborhood that says you've arrived, the wardrobe that matches your title, the vacations that photograph well. None of these things are categorically wrong, but when they're consistently funded at the expense of investment contributions, when they're the reason your retirement account looks embarrassingly small for your age, when they're how you justify not yet having a real emergency fund, they are silently, systematically dismantling your financial future. The people who build genuine wealth in their 30s are almost universally indistinguishable from people who are financially struggling if you only observe their visible lifestyle. They drive sensible cars. They live in houses that are noticeably more modest than what they could technically qualify for. They skip some of the trips. They're not performing wealth. They're building it. And the distance between those two paths doesn't become visible until your mid-40s, when one group starts talking about options and flexibility, and the other group starts talking about stress and being trapped.
So let's be practical, because understanding the dangers is only useful if it leads somewhere actionable. The first move is to treat every raise like it doesn't exist for at least 6 months. When your income increases, your lifestyle should stay flat. Direct the raise entirely toward investment contributions or debt paydown, and let several months pass before you make any decision about whether a lifestyle adjustment is actually warranted versus just feels warranted in the emotional rush of having more money. The second move is to run the honest housing number before you sign anything. Not the number the bank approves you for. The number that allows you to keep investing $800 to $1,000 per month after every housing cost is covered. If the house requires you to stop investing seriously, the house costs too much, regardless of what the approval letter says. The third move is to automate your investments before the money has a chance to become anything else. Direct contributions pulled automatically from your paycheck or account on payday. Not after the bills are paid, not after the social obligations are funded, first. Your future self gets paid before anyone or anything else touches that income. And the fourth move is to get genuinely honest about which social expenses actually matter to you versus which ones you're funding because you're afraid of what declining says about you. There are people in your life whose milestones you genuinely want to be part of. There are others where you're spending $700 on a weekend trip for someone you'll exchange maybe 4 text messages a year with going forward. You already know the difference. Spending accordingly isn't being a bad friend, it's being a financially functional one.
Your 30s are not a lost cause, not even close. They are actually the single most powerful decade you have for building wealth, which is precisely why they're also the most dangerous. The same forces that make this decade your greatest opportunity make it your greatest risk. The income is real. The compound interest window is still open, but it won't stay open forever. The habits you build right now, in this decade, will determine whether you are someone with genuine options and freedom at 55 or someone with a long list of expensive choices that made sense at the time. The version of you at 55 is not some distant hypothetical you'll deal with later. They are the direct output of the decisions the current version of you is making this year, this month, this paycheck. The traps are real. The math is unforgiving. But you're still inside the window where none of this is irreversible. And honestly, that's the only thing that matters right now.